Welcome back to my channel. Hey everyone, before we start, here's a short summary so you know what the story is about. Then we'll go into the full story. The Snowdrop House begins as a forgotten ruin, mirroring two lonely hearts that long for love. Through chance encounter, shared restoration, and the quiet uncovering of hidden emotions, their bond deepens with every moment spent together. In the end, the house and their hearts stand renewed, shining with resilience, hope, and love restored. Now, let's begin the full story. The Snowdrop House stood in silence, weathered by the years, its walls chipped and its windows clouded with dust. Once it must have been beautiful, a place of warmth and laughter, but now it carried the sadness of neglect. Its paint had faded, its roof sagged, and every corner whispered of days long gone. To look upon it was to see not only the ruin of a house, but also the image of a lonely heart, one that had been forgotten, yet still held the memory of love within. There is something striking about the way broken places mirror broken people. Just as a house may lose its glow when left without care, so too does the heart grow dim when left without affection. When you stand before such a place, you cannot help but feel a quiet ache, as if the walls themselves long to be touched again, to be cared for. In that ache lies a reflection of every soul that has waited for love and found none, every soul that has been overlooked while others walked by, never pausing to see the beauty still hidden beneath the cracks. The Snowdrop House was more than wood and stone. It was a symbol of longing, of time endured, of hope that has not entirely died. Think of how the heart, much like this house, carries its own architecture. The walls are built of memories, the windows open to dreams, and the doors invite those who are brave enough to step inside. But when no one comes, when silence becomes its only companion, the house grows cold and the heart becomes weary. Yet even in weariness there remains a quiet strength. Beneath the dust, the Snowdrop House still stood. Beneath the sorrow, the heart still beat. It is this persistence, this fragile endurance, that makes both a house and a heart so very human. And so it was that in the loneliness of Snowdrop House, there lived the possibility of something more. You could almost imagine it waiting, patient but desperate, for someone who might see beyond its worn face. Someone who would not shrink away at the sight of its flaws, but instead find in them the proof of life lived, the evidence of stories yet untold. What others might call ruin, a tender soul might call potential. What seemed like decay to many could be, to one who loved, the beginning of restoration. For in truth, love often arrives not when everything is perfect, but when something broken calls out to be made whole again. This Snowdrop House, old and forgotten, seemed to beg for a chance to feel alive once more, to shelter laughter, warmth, and belonging. And just as a heart left untouched longs for the return of love's gentle presence, so too did this house whisper its silent plea into the quiet air. It was not merely a house in need of repair. It was a soul in need of love. It was within the stillness of that abandoned place that two souls, quite unaware of what awaited them, stepped across the threshold of the Snowdrop House. The air was thick with dust, and yet it held the sweetness of forgotten memories, as though the house itself was waiting for this very moment. The boards creaked beneath their feet, the sound echoing faintly in the hollow rooms, and it was there, in the quiet ruin, that their eyes met for the first time. At first, there was hesitation, the kind that lingers between strangers who are suddenly aware of one another's presence. She carried the kind of curiosity that drew her into hidden places, a searching spirit that saw beauty even in decay. He, on the other hand, had come not in search of wonder, but of work, drawn by the challenge of repair, the promise of restoring what others had long abandoned. Neither had expected to find anyone else there, much less someone whose presence would alter the course of their days. The silence stretched, but it was not empty. It was charged as though the very house itself held its breath. She smiled first, soft and uncertain, as if unsure whether she should apologize for intruding. He, with a steady gaze, returned the smile, though his voice was the first to break through the air. What he said mattered little. It was the way he said it, a tone both gentle and firm that began to weave a thread between them. Words at times are clumsy things, yet in moments like this they carry a weight that lingers. There was something almost symbolic in their meeting there, amidst walls that had seen better days and windows that barely let in the light. For just as the house stood in its broken state, so too did they each carry pieces of themselves that had known weariness and sorrow. Perhaps it was this unspoken likeness that allowed them to see each other not as strangers, but as companions in waiting. The house, with its quiet dignity, became the stage upon which this first meeting played out, lending to their encounter a sense of inevitability. Every glance, every pause, seemed to deepen the impression that something had shifted, though neither could have put it into words at the time. What began as chance became something more, and the stillness that once filled the Snowdrop House was replaced with the warmth of two lives brushing against one another. Even the air itself seemed lighter, as if the house approved of what had begun within its walls. And so, what might have been an ordinary crossing of paths became the beginning of something extraordinary. Their worlds, once separate and solitary, touched in that forgotten place, and from that single encounter nothing could remain the same. Day after day, they returned to the Snowdrop House, their hands busy with tools and brushes, their eyes attentive to every flaw that time had left behind. The work was not easy. The walls were cracked, the wood was weak, and the roof sighed under its own weight. Yet with every nail driven in and every stone set back into place, something subtle began to unfold. It was not only the house that was slowly being healed, it was also the two who labored within it. For as they tended to the brokenness around them, they discovered that their own hearts, once weary, began to find a quiet strength again. There is a certain honesty in repair. One cannot mend a broken wall without first touching its rough edges, seeing where it has faltered, and admitting what has been lost. In the same way, they could not avoid the truths of their own lives, the disappointments, the loneliness, the silent burdens carried for too long. Yet, as they scraped away the old and made room for the new, the act itself became a gentle form of confession. The walls that bore the scars of time were not unlike the scars each of them carried, but both seemed softer, less painful, when seen together. In those hours of labor, conversation came easily. There was laughter when paint dripped where it should not, comfort when a task seemed too heavy, and an ease in sharing dreams that perhaps they had not dared to voice aloud before. The house became their confidant, listening quietly as they revealed pieces of themselves they had long kept hidden. And just as the beams grew stronger under their care, so too did the bond between them, each small kindness building upon the last, until what once felt broken began to take the shape of something whole. The work required patience, and in patience they found grace. Where one faltered, the other steadied. Where one grew discouraged, the other reminded them of how far they had already come. The very act of working side by side created a rhythm, a harmony, as though their hearts had decided to rebuild themselves along with the house. The cracks in the plaster no longer seemed like flaws, but reminders of resilience, proof that both the house and their spirits had survived. It is a tender truth that love often grows not in moments of perfection, but in shared struggles, in quiet perseverance, in the act of choosing again and again to keep building, to keep believing. The Snowdrop House began to change beneath their hands. the dust giving way to light, the silence filling with laughter, and within that transformation, their own souls were quietly restored. And when at last they stepped back to see their progress, it was not only the house that stood stronger, but their hearts as well, bound together by the healing they had found in each other. As they moved through the rooms of the Snowdrop House, there was a sense that the very walls were alive with memory. The air held a faint perfume of something long faded, perhaps roses once placed on a windowsill, or the scent of wood polished in days when the house was still full of life. Each creak of the floorboards seemed less like a flaw and more like a whisper, a soft reminder that others had walked here before, laughed here before, and loved here before. The house was not empty. It carried within it all the moments that time had refused to erase. It is strange how silence can speak when one is willing to listen. A mark on the doorframe revealed where someone had measured the height of a child. A burn in the corner of the kitchen floor spoke of a careless candle that must have fallen during a holiday gathering. The faded wallpaper in the sitting room told of a family's choice, once considered fashionable, now fragile and peeling with age. These small details, almost invisible at first glance, became part of the story they felt unfolding around them. The house was not simply old, it was rich with secrets, with echoes of hearts that once beat as strongly as theirs did now. For them, these discoveries became more than curiosities, they became mirrors. Each hidden sign of the past brought to light the feelings they themselves had long carried but seldom voiced. Just as the house kept quiet its history until they entered to notice it, so too had they kept their emotions tucked away, waiting for the right time to be revealed. A laugh shared over a discovered trinket in the attic carried with it the weight of affection neither dared yet to confess. A gentle touch against a cracked banister lingered just a moment too long, as though the memory of every hand that had once rested there gave them permission to admit their own longing. The Snowdrop House seemed to conspire with them, guiding them toward the truth of what they felt. Its whispers were not only of the lives that had passed within its walls, but of the life it still longed to hold again. In its quiet urging they found courage, not to declare their feelings outright, but to allow them to bloom slowly, like sunlight slipping through a shuttered window. Every room held not just a secret of the past, but an invitation to step closer to one another, to trust that hidden feelings, once revealed, might bring warmth instead of loss. And so, as they uncovered the traces of those who came before, they uncovered themselves as well. The house taught them that silence is not emptiness, but a place where truth waits to be heard, and in listening they discovered that their own hearts, like the Snowdrop House, had long been whispering for love. With every brick they lifted, with every board they nailed into place, something greater than the Snowdrop House began to take shape. Their days were filled with dust on their clothes and tiredness in their bones, yet the weariness never felt heavy, for it was shared. The more they worked side by side, the less the labor seemed like a burden, and the more it felt like a rhythm, one heartbeat echoing against another. In the clatter of tools and the scrape of stone, there was a harmony, unspoken but undeniable, a quiet music that belonged only to them. It is in the simplest acts that affection grows strongest. When he steadied the ladder as she climbed, she felt a trust so natural it surprised her. When she handed him a brick before he even asked, he marveled at how easily she seemed to understand his need. These moments, small and unremarkable to any other eye, became the foundation of something steady and sure. They began to look for each other not just in the work, but in the pauses between, when a glance could linger and a smile could hold more meaning than a dozen words. The house, once so frail, responded to their touch, rising little by little under their care, and with every repaired wall and smoothed corner, their bond grew firmer, as though the effort they poured into the house was binding them closer together. They discovered that love does not always declare itself with grand gestures, but rather it builds, brick upon brick, moment upon moment, until one day it stands solid, undeniable, like the walls they restored with their own hands. At times there were frustrations, measurements that did not fit, weather that turned against them, tools that refused to cooperate. But even in those moments their strength grew. For when one faltered, the other carried forward, and the balance between them became the mortar that held them together. Instead of dividing them, the challenges wove them tighter, proving that the bond they were forming was not fragile but resilient. And so, love unfolded quietly in the midst of labor. It was there in the shared water canteen on a hot afternoon, in the laughter that spilled out when paint smeared across a cheek, in the silence that felt safe rather than empty. With each task completed, they discovered not only the beauty of the Snowdrop House returning to life, but also the beauty of a connection that deepened with every effort made together. The harder they worked, the stronger their love became, until both the house and their hearts stood as proof of what could be built when two souls labored side by side. When at last the final touches were placed upon the Snowdrop House, it stood not as a shadow of what it once had been, but as something renewed, something radiant. The windows sparkled with light where once they had been dull and lifeless. The walls glowed with fresh color, and the roof no longer bowed beneath the weight of years, but held itself proudly against the sky. The house seemed almost to breathe again, alive with the warmth of care and the promise of days yet to come. It was more than a building. It was a home reclaimed from silence and sorrow, now alive with laughter and love. And just as the house was restored, so too were the hearts that had poured themselves into it. The cracks within them, long hidden and unspoken, had been healed by the gentle rhythm of shared labor, by the patience of listening and the courage of trusting. They had come together first as strangers beneath a crumbling roof, but with each board nailed into place and each corner polished back to life, they had uncovered something far more lasting. What the Snowdrop House had needed, a steady hand, a devoted heart, was no different from what they themselves had needed, and in giving that to the house, they had also given it to each other. There was a quiet triumph in the way they stood side by side, gazing at their work. The home glowed in the evening light, but the true radiance was in their faces, where joy mingled with relief, and where affection no longer hid in silence, but shone as openly as the windows they had polished clean. The love that had grown between them had not arrived suddenly, like lightning, but rather like the rising of the sun, slow, certain, and impossible to ignore once it had filled every shadow with warmth. It is a tender truth that love is often most visible in the simple things, the way one reached for the other's hand without needing to ask, the way their laughter filled the halls once empty, the way silence, once so heavy, now felt peaceful, for it was no longer loneliness but companionship. The Snowdrop House did not merely stand restored, it lived again because it sheltered love within its walls, and in that final moment, as they crossed the threshold together, they knew the house was not the only thing brought back to life. Their hearts, once weary and unsure, now beat with a certainty that could not be shaken. The Snowdrop House shone brightly, but brighter still was the love they had built within it. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Snowdrop House, where love and hope were restored brick by brick. If this story touched your heart and helped your English grow, I'd love to share more with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me for more stories that inspire and teach.